The 16th century witnessed the meteoric rise of the Spanish Empire. Spain, newly unified under the Habsburg dynasty, embarked on an unprecedented era of exploration and conquest. Columbus's voyages, though initially intended to find a westward route to the east, opened up a new world ripe for the taking. Gold and silver poured in from the Americas, fueling Spain's ambition and transforming it into the most powerful empire in Europe. This period, known as the Golden Age, saw Spain's influence reach every corner of the globe, leaving an indelible mark on the course of history. Spain's early dominance had a profound impact on the still developing British Empire. England, a relatively small island nation at the time, looked on with a mixture of admiration and envy. The Spaniards had shown the way, demonstrating the immense wealth and power that could be gained from overseas colonies. The English, eager to claim their own piece of the pie, would learn much from the Spanish experience, both positive and negative. This essay will explore the multifaceted influence of the Spanish Empire on the development of its British counterpart. The Spanish provided a blueprint for empire building, a template that the British would adapt and refine in their own pursuit of global dominance. From colonization methods to naval strategies, the Spanish experience served as both inspiration and cautionary tale for the rising British Empire. The interplay between these two great powers would shape the course of world history for centuries to come. The relationship between the Spanish and British empires was complex and often fraught with conflict. While the British learned much from the Spanish, they also sought to challenge and ultimately surpass their rivals. This dynamic would lead to intense competition for territory, resources, and ultimately global supremacy. Spain's approach to colonization was both innovative and brutal. Driven by a potent mix of religious zeal and economic ambition, the Spanish established a system of control that would define their empire for centuries. Central to this system was the concept of the encomienda, a system where Spanish conquistadors were granted large tracts of land and the labor of the indigenous population. In theory, the encomienda system was meant to be a form of reciprocal obligation, with the Spanish providing protection and religious instruction in exchange for labor and tribute. In reality, it often devolved into a system of brutal exploitation and oppression. The Catholic Church played a crucial role in Spain's colonial enterprise. Missionaries accompanied the conquistadors, tasked with converting the indigenous population to Christianity. While some genuinely sought to spread their faith peacefully, the forced conversions and destruction of native religious practices left a legacy of resentment and cultural disruption. The Spanish also established a complex social hierarchy in their colonies, with those of pure Spanish blood occupying the top rung. This rigid system fueled resentment among the indigenous population and later among those of mixed race. The British, observing the Spanish experience, would later adopt aspects of this model while making significant modifications. They too sought to extract wealth from their colonies and establish their own systems of control. However, the British would generally rely more heavily on private enterprise and less on direct crown control than the Spanish. They also developed different approaches to interacting with indigenous populations, often forming alliances and engaging in trade, though this did not preclude conflict and exploitation. The Spanish model, for all its flaws, provided a framework for European expansion into the Americas. It established a precedent for resource extraction, religious conversion, and the imposition of European culture on a global scale. The British, while adapting and refining this model, would ultimately follow in Spain's footsteps, shaping the world in their own image. The discovery of vast deposits of gold and silver in the Americas was a game-changer for Spain. The influx of such immense wealth fueled Spain's ambitious foreign policy and financed its costly wars across Europe. The Spanish crown, under the Habsburg dynasty, used this newfound wealth to maintain powerful armies, build magnificent palaces, and patronize the arts. Spain's opulence became legendary, a testament to the riches flowing in from the New World. However, this dependence on American treasure also had its downsides. It led to inflation, making Spanish goods less competitive in international markets. The Spanish economy became overly reliant on the extraction of raw materials, neglecting the development of domestic industries. Furthermore, the constant flow of treasure from the Americas fostered a culture of extravagance and a disdain for manual labor among the Spanish aristocracy. The British, observing the Spanish experience, learned valuable lessons about the pitfalls of relying too heavily on colonial wealth. They recognized the importance of developing a diversified economy, investing in manufacturing and promoting trade. The British East India Company, chartered in 1600, exemplified this approach, focusing on trade and establishing a foothold in Asia, a region largely ignored by the Spanish. While the Spanish initially benefited greatly from their American riches, their failure to diversify their economy and invest wisely ultimately contributed to their decline. The British, by contrast, took a more measured approach, laying the foundation for a more sustainable and ultimately more powerful empire. Section 4. Ruling the waves, Spain's naval dominance. The Spanish Empire's vast reach required a powerful navy to protect its shipping lanes and project its power across the globe. The Spanish Armada, the most formidable naval force of its time, became a symbol of Spanish might. The Armada's galleons, heavily armed and capable of carrying large numbers of soldiers, patrolled the Atlantic, guarding the treasure fleets returning from the Americas and fending off rivals. Spanish shipyards hummed with activity, churning out warships and merchant vessels. Spanish navigators and cartographers made significant advances in seafaring technology and map-making. The astrolabe, the quadrant, and the compass, essential tools for navigation, were refined and improved upon by Spanish sailors. The Spanish also developed sophisticated naval tactics, relying on close formations and overwhelming firepower to defeat their enemies. The British, initially outmatched at sea, recognized the importance of naval power in challenging Spanish hegemony. They invested heavily in shipbuilding, expanding their fleet and improving their naval technology. British shipwrights experimented with new designs, developing faster and more maneuverable ships that could stand up to the Spanish galleons. The British also fostered a culture of seamanship, encouraging privateering and exploration, which honed the skills of their sailors. The rivalry between the Spanish and British navies would play out in numerous engagements across the globe. From the Caribbean to the English Channel, these clashes at sea would shape the balance of power and ultimately determine the fate of empires. Section 5. The British Challenge, Learning from the Masters. As the 16th century progressed, England, under the reign of Elizabeth I, emerged as a serious challenger to Spanish dominance. The English had learned much from the Spanish experience, both in terms of the potential rewards of empire and the strategies needed to achieve them. English explorers such as Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh ventured across the Atlantic, seeking to establish colonies and plunder Spanish treasure. The English, recognizing the limitations of Spain's reliance on raw materials, focused on developing their own industries and trade networks. The establishment of the Virginia Company in 1606 marked the beginning of England's permanent presence in North America. Unlike the Spanish, who sought to impose their culture and religion on the indigenous population, the English adopted a more pragmatic approach, often engaging in trade and forming alliances with Native American tribes. English privateers, operating with the tacit approval of the Crown, harassed Spanish shipping, capturing treasure ships and disrupting the flow of wealth to Spain. These daring raids, while officially denounced by the English government, enriched England's coffers and weakened Spain's grip on its overseas possessions. The line between privateering and piracy was often blurred, with figures like Sir Francis Drake becoming both national heroes and symbols of English audacity. The English challenge to Spanish dominance was multifaceted, encompassing economic competition, colonial rivalry, and outright naval warfare. The British, having learned from the Spanish experience, were determined to forge their own path to empire, one that would ultimately eclipse the achievements of their predecessors.
The Spanish Empire, a name that echoes through history, conjuring images of vast territories, fearless conquistadors, and unimaginable wealth in the form of gold and treasures. From its humble beginnings on the Iberian Peninsula, Spain rose to become a formidable global superpower. Its influence and reach extended across vast oceans and numerous continents, shaping the course of history. For centuries, the Spanish flag proudly flew over lands stretching from the Americas to Asia. The empire left an indelible mark on the world, influencing cultures, economies, and politics. This essay will delve into the captivating and complex story of the Spanish Empire, exploring its meteoric rise to power, its enduring impact on the world, and the ultimate reasons for its decline. The story of the Spanish Empire is one of ambition, relentless exploration, and conquest. It is a tale of daring adventurers and strategic minds. It is a story of cultural exchange and conflict, of monumental triumphs and devastating tragedies. The Spanish Empire's legacy is a tapestry woven with both glory and sorrow. Through this exploration, we will uncover the complexities of this historical giant, understanding its profound significance in shaping the world we know today. Join us as we journey through the annals of time to witness the rise and fall of the Spanish Empire. The foundation of the Spanish Empire was laid in the late 15th century, fueled by the spirit of the Reconquista, the centuries-long struggle to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. This relentless conflict, spanning over 700 years, was marked by numerous battles, shifting alliances, and a deep-seated determination to restore Christian rule. This period of conflict instilled a sense of unity and purpose in the Spanish kingdoms, forging a collective identity that transcended regional differences and rivalries. Eventually, culminating in the unification of Castile and Aragon under the rule of King Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella I in 1469. Their marriage was not just a personal union, but a strategic alliance that consolidated power and resources. This union proved to be a pivotal moment in Spanish history, laying the groundwork for a centralized and powerful monarchy. With a united front, Spain could now turn its attention outwards, embarking on ambitious ventures beyond its borders. The year 1492 marked a turning point with the conclusion of the Reconquista and the momentous voyage of Christopher Columbus, funded by Queen Isabella, which symbolized Spain's new era of exploration and conquest, which inadvertently led to the discovery of the Americas. This monumental event opened up unprecedented opportunities for wealth, power, and influence. These events set the stage for Spain's dramatic expansion onto the world stage, establishing a vast colonial empire that would shape global history for centuries to come. The Spanish Empire's rise was propelled by a cast of ambitious and often ruthless individuals. Christopher Columbus, though not Spanish by birth, played a pivotal role, opening the door to the New World. Following in his wake were conquistadors like Hernán Cortés, who conquered the mighty Aztec Empire, and Francisco Pizarro, who toppled the Inca Empire, amassing vast wealth and territories for the Spanish crown. These conquests, while brutal, were instrumental in establishing Spanish dominance in the Americas. Back in Europe, Emperor Charles V, heir to the Spanish throne, further expanded Spanish influence through strategic marriages and military campaigns, making Spain a major player in European politics. Driven by a thirst for gold, glory, and the desire to spread Catholicism, Spanish exploration and conquest continued at an unrelenting pace. Across the Atlantic, Spanish colonies sprouted throughout the Caribbean, Mexico, Central America, and South America. The immense wealth extracted from these colonies, particularly silver from mines in Potosi, present-day Bolivia, fueled Spain's rise to become the wealthiest and most powerful empire in Europe. Spanish influence wasn't confined to the Americas. In the Pacific, Ferdinand Magellan's expedition, though he perished en route, achieved the first circumnavigation of the globe, claiming the Philippines for Spain and establishing a key trading post in Asia. This eastward expansion brought Spain into contact with powerful empires like the Ming dynasty in China and the Mughal Empire in India, facilitating trade and cultural exchange. Section 5. Cultural exchange and conflict, the impact of Spanish rule. The Spanish Empire's impact on the world was profound and multifaceted, shaping the course of history in numerous ways. On one hand, the influx of gold and silver from the Americas fueled a period of economic growth in Europe, stimulating trade and contributing to the rise of capitalism. This wealth allowed European nations to expand their influence and power globally. The exchange of goods, plants and animals between the Old World and the New World, known as the Columbian Exchange, had a transformative effect on diets, agriculture and ecosystems across the globe. New crops like potatoes and maize became staples in Europe, while Old World livestock such as horses and cattle were introduced to the Americas. However, Spanish rule also brought about significant conflict and exploitation. The Spanish conquest led to the destruction of indigenous civilizations and cultures, leaving a lasting impact on the social fabric of the Americas. Indigenous populations in the Americas faced brutal treatment, forced labor, and the introduction of European diseases that decimated their numbers. The encomienda system forced many into harsh working conditions, drastically altering their way of life. The transatlantic slave trade, in which Spain participated, brought millions of Africans to the Americas in chains, leaving a dark stain on history. This forced migration had profound effects on the demographics and cultures of the New World, creating a legacy of inequality and suffering that persists to this day. Section 6. The Spanish Golden Age, a flourishing of arts and culture. Despite the shadows cast by colonialism, the 16th and 17th centuries marked a period of cultural flourishing in Spain known as the Golden Age. This era witnessed a surge in artistic, literary and intellectual achievements. Painters like El Greco and Diego Velázquez gained international renown for their masterpieces, while writers like Miguel de Cervantes, author of Don Quixote, produced works that continue to captivate readers today. The Spanish language spread widely during this period, becoming one of the most spoken languages in the world. Universities established in Spain's American colonies became centers of learning, further disseminating Spanish culture and ideas throughout the empire. Section 7. Seeds of decline, internal and external pressures. By the 17th century, the once mighty Spanish Empire began to show signs of strain. Constant warfare in Europe, coupled with the challenges of governing such a vast and diverse empire, took its toll. The influx of silver from the Americas, while initially a boon, eventually led to inflation and economic instability. Spain's rigid social hierarchy, with its emphasis on privilege and nobility, stifled innovation and economic mobility. Moreover, other European powers, sensing Spain's vulnerability, began to challenge its dominance. England, France and the Netherlands established their own colonies in the Americas, often clashing with Spanish interests. Piracy, both state-sponsored and independent, further disrupted Spanish trade and drained its coffers. Section 8. The Setting Sun, the decline of the Spanish Empire. The 18th century witnessed the gradual decline of the Spanish Empire. A series of unsuccessful wars, coupled with internal strife and economic mismanagement, weakened Spain's grip on its overseas possessions. The rise of Enlightenment ideas, which challenged the absolute authority of monarchs and the Catholic Church, further fueled dissent within the empire. The Napoleonic Wars in the early 19th century dealt a final blow to the Spanish Empire. Napoleon's invasion of Spain in 1808 sparked a wave of independence movements across Spanish America. By the mid-19th century, most of Spain's American colonies had won their independence, leaving Spain with only a few scattered territories. Section 9. Legacy of an empire enduring influences on the world. Despite its decline, the Spanish Empire left an enduring legacy on the world. The Spanish language, spoken by over 500 million people today, remains a testament to Spain's historical influence. Spanish architecture, cuisine and music continue to thrive in many parts of the world, particularly in Latin America. The Spanish legal system, with its emphasis on codified law, influenced legal systems in Latin America and beyond. The Catholic Church, which played a central role in the Spanish Empire, remains a major religious institution in many former Spanish colonies. Section 10. Conclusion. Reflections on the Spanish Empire. The Spanish Empire, a product of its time, exemplified both the ambition and the brutality of early modern imperialism. Its rise and fall offer valuable lessons about the complexities of power, the impact of cultural exchange, and the enduring legacies of empires. While we may marvel at the achievements of this historical giant, we must also acknowledge the human cost of its expansion and the injustices inflicted upon indigenous populations. Ultimately, the story of the Spanish Empire serves as a reminder of the interconnectedness of human history and the lasting impact of our actions.
Yemen, a nation situated at the crossroads of ancient trade routes, finds itself grappling with a complex and devastating conflict. This land, rich in history and culture, has become a battleground for various factions and external powers, each with their own agendas and interests. This conflict, deeply rooted in historical grievances and fueled by regional power dynamics, has plunged the nation into a humanitarian catastrophe. The scale of the devastation is immense, with countless lives lost, infrastructure destroyed, and millions displaced from their homes. Understanding the current situation necessitates a glimpse into the historical tapestry of Yemen. The country's rich past is marked by periods of prosperity and turmoil, each leaving an indelible mark on its present. The seeds of discord were sown long before the current conflict erupted in 2015. Historical grievances, socio-economic disparities, and political marginalization have long been part of Yemen's narrative. Yemen, even prior to the war, grappled with poverty, political instability, and internal divisions. These issues were exacerbated by a lack of resources, weak governance, and external interference, creating a volatile environment. These vulnerabilities created a fertile ground for conflict to take root. The nation's fragility made it susceptible to internal strife and external manipulation, setting the stage for the turmoil that was to come. The current conflict can be traced back to the 2011 Arab Spring uprisings, which swept across the Middle East and North Africa, demanding political and economic reforms. In Yemen, these uprisings ignited a spark of hope among the populace, who sought an end to decades of autocratic rule. In Yemen, these protests led to the ousting of longtime President Ali Abdullah Saleh. His departure, however, did not bring the anticipated peace and stability. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new era of uncertainty and conflict. However, instead of ushering in an era of stability, the transition of power created a power vacuum. This vacuum was characterized by a lack of strong leadership and cohesive governance, making the country vulnerable to further unrest. This vacuum was quickly filled by various factions vying for control, including the Houthis, a Shia Muslim group from the north. The Houthis, who had long felt marginalized by the central government, saw an opportunity to assert their influence and address their grievances. The Houthis, who had long felt marginalized by the central government, seized the opportunity to expand their influence, capturing the capital Sana'a in 2014. Their advance was swift and decisive, altering the balance of power in the country. This power grab triggered the intervention of a Saudi-led coalition in 2015, escalating the conflict into a full-blown civil war. The involvement of regional powers added a new dimension to the conflict, making it even more complex and intractable. The war has since drawn in various international actors, each pursuing their own strategic interests, further complicating the path to peace. After years of brutal conflict and unimaginable suffering, a glimmer of hope emerged in 2023. A UN-brokered truce brought a much-needed respite from the violence, offering a window of opportunity for peace. This truce, though fragile, marked a significant step towards ending the bloodshed and alleviating the humanitarian crisis. The truce facilitated the flow of humanitarian aid, providing a lifeline to millions of Yemenis on the brink of starvation. It also paved the way for negotiations between the warring factions, offering a platform for dialogue and reconciliation. However, the road to peace is long and arduous, and the truce remains precarious. Despite the cessation of major hostilities, sporadic clashes continue to erupt, underscoring the deep mistrust between the warring parties. The underlying issues that fueled the conflict remain largely unaddressed, posing a constant threat to the truce. The international community has welcomed the truce as a positive step, but remains cautiously optimistic. Sustaining the truce and translating it into a lasting peace requires sustained diplomatic efforts, a commitment to dialogue, and a willingness to address the root causes of the conflict. The Houthi group, a key player in the Yemen conflict, has increasingly posed a challenge to maritime security in the Red Sea, a vital waterway for global trade. Their tactics, often involving attacks on commercial vessels, have raised concerns about the safety of navigation in the region and the potential for wider regional instability. The Houthis justify their actions as retaliation against the Saudi-led coalition, which they accuse of imposing a blockade on Yemen, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. However, these attacks have drawn international condemnation, as they threaten one of the world's most important shipping lanes. The Red Sea serves as a conduit for a significant portion of global trade, connecting Asia to Europe through the Suez Canal. Any disruption to shipping in this region has far-reaching consequences, impacting energy prices, supply chains, and the global economy. The international community is grappling with how to address the Houthi threat to maritime security. Some advocate for increased naval patrols and military deterrence, while others emphasize the need for dialogue and a political solution to the underlying conflict. Finding the right balance between security measures and diplomatic efforts is crucial to ensuring the safety of navigation in the Red Sea and preventing further escalation. Section 4, Saudi Arabia, at a crossroads. Balancing interests in a turbulent region. Saudi Arabia, a regional powerhouse and a key player in the Yemen conflict, finds itself at a crossroads. The kingdom's involvement in Yemen has been a defining aspect of its foreign policy in recent years. The kingdom, which intervened in Yemen in 2015 to counter the Houthi advance, is now grappling with the costs and consequences of a protracted war. The initial objective was to restore the internationally recognized government of President Hadi, but the situation has become far more complex. The Saudi-led intervention, initially aimed at swiftly restoring the internationally recognized government, has morphed into a costly and protracted conflict. The war has dragged on for years with no clear end in sight, leading to significant human and material costs. The kingdom has faced international criticism for civilian casualties caused by its airstrikes and its role in exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The conflict has led to widespread suffering among the Yemeni population, drawing condemnation from human rights organizations and foreign governments alike. Moreover, the war has taken a toll on Saudi Arabia's economy and international standing. The financial burden of the conflict has strained the kingdom's resources, impacting its ambitious Vision 2030 plan aimed at diversifying the economy. The kingdom, seeking to diversify its economy away from oil, has seen its resources strained by the conflict. The prolonged war has diverted funds and attention from critical domestic projects, slowing down economic reforms and development initiatives. The war has also tarnished Saudi Arabia's image on the global stage, leading to calls for arms embargoes and diplomatic pressure. The international community has increasingly scrutinized Saudi actions, affecting its diplomatic relations and alliances. In recent years, there has been a noticeable shift in Saudi Arabia's approach to the Yemen conflict. Recognizing the unsustainable nature of the military campaign, the kingdom has started to explore alternative strategies. The kingdom has shown a greater willingness to engage in dialogue with the Houthis and explore avenues for a political solution. This diplomatic engagement marks a significant change in strategy, aiming to bring about a peaceful resolution to the conflict. This shift reflects a recognition of the limits of military intervention and a desire to extricate itself from a costly and protracted war. By pursuing diplomatic channels, Saudi Arabia hopes to stabilize the region and rebuild its international reputation, while also focusing on its domestic priorities. Section 5. The looming shadow of war factors driving potential for renewed conflict. Despite the fragile truce and ongoing peace efforts, the spectre of renewed conflict hangs heavy over Yemen. The country has been ravaged by years of war, and the path to lasting peace is fraught with challenges. The situation remains volatile, and several factors contribute to the risk of a return to full-scale fighting. The landscape is a complex web of alliances and enmities, with each faction vying for power and control. The deep mistrust between the warring factions, fueled by years of bloodshed and atrocities, remains a major obstacle to peace. This mistrust is not just between the main combatants, but also among various smaller groups and communities. Each side views the other with suspicion, making it challenging to build the trust necessary for a lasting settlement. The peace talks, while a step in the right direction, often stall due to this pervasive distrust. The proliferation of weapons and the presence of external actors further complicate the situation. Foreign nations have their own agendas, often exacerbating the conflict rather than helping to resolve it. The flow of arms into Yemen has fueled the conflict and empowered various factions. Smuggling networks thrive, ensuring a steady supply of weapons that perpetuate the violence. Regional powers with their own strategic interests have also played a role in prolonging the conflict. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran see Yemen as a battleground for their broader geopolitical struggles. Moreover, the humanitarian crisis, already dire, could easily spiral out of control if fighting resumes. The civilian population bears the brunt of the conflict, with millions facing starvation and disease. Millions of Yemenis depend on humanitarian aid for survival, and a return to war would severely restrict access to essential goods and services. Aid organizations struggle to operate in such a hostile environment, often risking their lives to deliver help. The international community faces the daunting task of mitigating these risks and fostering an environment conducive to peace. Diplomatic efforts must be intensified, and a coordinated approach is essential to address the multifaceted nature of the conflict. This requires addressing the underlying drivers of the conflict, promoting dialogue and reconciliation, and holding spoilers accountable for violations of international law. Only through sustained and inclusive efforts can Yemen hope to achieve a lasting peace. Iran and Kuwait. Two nations, forever linked by geography and history. Their relationship has long been strained, marked by periods of cooperation and open conflict. The discovery of oil in the Persian Gulf in the early 20th century added another layer of complexity. Territorial disputes, fueled by oil wealth, created a climate of mistrust. The Shatt al-Arab waterway, a vital shipping lane, became a particular point of contention. Both countries claimed sovereignty, leading to frequent clashes. The 1975 Algiers Agreement, brokered by Algeria, provided a temporary solution. It demarcated the waterway, easing tensions, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. The 1980 to 1988 Iran-Iraq War further poisoned relations between Iran and Kuwait. Kuwait, fearing Iranian expansionism, provided financial support to Iraq. This angered Iran, which saw Kuwait as siding with its enemy. The war's end left Iran isolated, but it did not extinguish its regional ambitions. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein, Iraq's dictator, shocked the world. His forces invaded Kuwait, swiftly occupying the small, oil-rich nation. Saddam claimed historical grievances, alleging Kuwait was a province of Iraq. He accused Kuwait of stealing Iraqi oil and exceeding OPEC quotas, driving down prices. However, Saddam's primary motivation was more opportunistic. He craved Kuwait's oil wealth to replenish Iraq's coffers, drained by the long war with Iran. He also sought to dominate the Persian Gulf, controlling a significant portion of the world's oil reserves. The international community condemned the invasion. The United Nations Security Council demanded Iraq's immediate withdrawal. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, formed a coalition of nations to confront Saddam. Operation Desert Storm began in January 1991. The US-led coalition launched a massive air campaign, targeting Iraqi military infrastructure and Saddam's elite Republican Guard. After weeks of bombardment, coalition ground forces launched a lightning offensive, liberating Kuwait in a matter of days. Saddam's gamble had backfired spectacularly. The Gulf War cemented American military dominance in the region. It also left Iraq crippled by sanctions and international isolation. Saddam's regime, though weakened, survived, but Iraq would continue to be a source of regional instability. For Kuwait, the war was a traumatic experience. The country's infrastructure lay in ruins and its oil industry was devastated. However, Kuwait, with substantial international aid, rebuilt. The experience, though, left a lasting mark, shaping Kuwait's foreign policy and its relationship with Iran. The Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 transformed the country into a theocracy. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the revolution's leader, denounced the United States as the Great Satan and vowed to export Iran's revolutionary ideology. Iran's regional ambitions, fueled by revolutionary zeal and anti-American sentiment, put it at odds with its neighbors, particularly the Gulf Arab states. The end of the Cold War in 1991 created a new geopolitical landscape. The United States emerged as the sole superpower, its influence extending across the Middle East. Iran, seeking to counter American hegemony, adopted a strategy of asymmetric warfare, supporting proxy militias and non-state actors across the region. In Lebanon, Iran provided support to Hezbollah, a Shia militant group, transforming it into a formidable fighting force. In Iraq, after the 2003 US invasion, Iran backed Shia militias which battled American forces and fueled sectarian violence. Iran's influence grew, challenging American interests and destabilizing the region. Section 5. Proxies and pressure. Iran's support for proxy militias became a defining feature of its regional strategy. These groups, often trained, armed, and funded by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, acted as instruments of Iranian foreign policy. They allowed Iran to project power, strike at its enemies, and destabilize its rivals, all while maintaining a degree of plausible deniability. In Syria, Iran's intervention in the civil war, which began in 2011, proved decisive. Iranian-backed militias, including Hezbollah, helped prop up the regime of Bashar al-Assad, preventing its collapse. Iran gained a strategic foothold in Syria, extending its influence to the Mediterranean Sea. Iran's network of proxies gave it leverage over its rivals, particularly Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Arab states. These groups could be mobilized to threaten shipping lanes, attack oil infrastructure, and sow chaos. The threat from these proxies became a constant source of tension, shaping the region's security landscape. Section 6. The nuclear question. Iran's nuclear program emerged as a major point of contention with the international community. The West feared Iran was seeking to develop nuclear weapons, a charge Tehran vehemently denied. Iran insisted its nuclear program was for peaceful purposes, intended for energy production and medical research. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, conducted numerous inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities. The IEA found inconsistencies in Iran's declarations and evidence of past activities that could be linked to weapons development. The international community responded with sanctions, seeking to pressure Iran to halt its uranium enrichment program. The nuclear issue became a diplomatic quagmire. Years of negotiations involving the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany resulted in the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal, lifted sanctions in exchange for Iran curtailing its nuclear program. Section 7. Flashpoint: the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway separating Iran from the Arabian Peninsula, is one of the world's most strategically important choke points. Approximately 20% of the world's oil supply passes through the strait, making it a vital artery for global energy markets. Iran, with its long coastline along the strait, has repeatedly threatened to block the waterway in response to sanctions or military action. The IRGC Navy, a branch of Iran's military, maintains a significant presence in the strait, conducting frequent naval exercises and harassing foreign vessels. The presence of Iranian naval forces and the threat of closure have made the Strait of Hormuz a flashpoint for potential conflict. The United States maintains a naval presence in the region, seeking to deter Iranian aggression and ensure the free flow of oil. The strait remains a tinderbox where miscalculations or provocations could easily escalate into a wider conflict. Section 8. A delicate balance. The United States has pursued a multifaceted strategy toward Iran, seeking to deter its malign activities while keeping the door open to diplomacy. This delicate balancing act has involved a combination of military pressure, sanctions, and diplomatic engagement. The US maintains a significant military presence in the Middle East, with bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. This force posture is intended to deter Iranian aggression and reassure US allies in the region. The US has also conducted joint military exercises with its Gulf Arab partners, demonstrating its commitment to their security. The Trump administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, arguing it did not go far enough in curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions. The US reimposed sanctions targeting Iran's oil exports and financial sector in an effort to pressure Tehran to renegotiate the deal. However, this maximum pressure campaign has had mixed results, exacerbating tensions and pushing Iran to take provocative actions. Section 9. The stakes. The stakes in the Iran-Kuwait conflict are high. The region is a tinderbox, and a wider conflict would have devastating consequences. The global economy, heavily reliant on oil from the Persian Gulf, would be severely impacted. A war would result in massive casualties and displacement, exacerbating the already dire humanitarian situation in the region. It would also further destabilize the Middle East, fueling extremism and terrorism. The conflict could draw in other regional and global powers, leading to a catastrophic escalation. The international community has a vested interest in preventing a wider conflict. Diplomacy, though challenging, remains the only viable path to a lasting solution. This will require addressing Iran's legitimate security concerns, finding a resolution to the nuclear issue, and easing regional tensions. Section 10. The path forward. The path forward in the Iran-Kuwait conflict is fraught with challenges. Mistrust runs deep, and the regional security landscape is complex. However, the pursuit of peace and stability requires a commitment to dialogue and a willingness to address the underlying issues fueling the conflict. Confidence-building measures are essential to reduce tensions and create an environment conducive to diplomacy. This could include resuming talks on the Iran nuclear deal, addressing Iran's concerns about regional security, and promoting cooperation on issues of common interest such as counterterrorism and maritime security. The international community must play a constructive role, encouraging dialogue, providing humanitarian assistance, and holding all parties accountable for their actions. A peaceful and prosperous future for the Middle East depends on it. The alternative is a descent into chaos and conflict, with consequences far beyond the region. The story of British rule in India began in the early 17th century. It started with the arrival of the British East India Company. Initially interested in spices, the company soon realized the potential for profit. They secured trading rights from the Mughal emperors. Trading posts grew into settlements like Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. The East India Company's ambitions grew. They took advantage of a weakening Mughal empire. This marked the beginning of their transformation into a powerful political force. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 marked a turning point. It cemented British dominance in India. The battle pitted the East India Company against Siraj-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Bengal. Bengal was a wealthy province that held immense economic significance. The company, led by Robert Clive, was notorious for its cunning. They bribed Mir Jafar, the commander-in-chief of the Nawab's army, ensuring the Nawab's defeat. The Battle of Plassey was a short but decisive encounter. It resulted in a resounding victory for the British. This victory had far-reaching consequences. The British gained control of Bengal, a major revenue source. This victory established the company as a major power in India and marked the beginning of British territorial expansion. They would go on to control vast swathes of the subcontinent. The Battle of Plassey was a testament to British military strategy and highlighted their willingness to use unscrupulous tactics. This victory cast a long shadow over India, paving the way for centuries of British rule. The consequences of this battle would continue to resonate long after the guns fell silent. Following their victory at Plassey, the East India Company tightened its grip on India. They expanded their control through a combination of military might and political maneuvering. They established new administrative systems and imposed their own laws and regulations. The company's primary objective was profit maximization, which led to the exploitation of India's resources. They plundered India's wealth and forced farmers to grow cash crops for export to Britain, often at the expense of food crops. This policy resulted in widespread famine. The company's policies led to significant social upheaval. They introduced the permanent settlement system, which benefited wealthy landowners but impoverished many farmers, deepening the divide between the rich and the poor. The British also tried to impose their culture. They promoted English education and attempted to convert Indians to Christianity. These actions were met with resistance and fueled resentment against British rule. The East India Company's rule was a period of profound change, marked by both progress and exploitation. The seeds of discontent sown during this period would eventually lead to a major uprising. The Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 was a watershed moment in the history of British rule in India. It was a violent uprising triggered by a seemingly insignificant issue, the introduction of new rifle cartridges. These cartridges were rumored to be greased with animal fat, which was highly offensive to both Hindu and Muslim sepoys, who considered it a violation of their religious beliefs. The mutiny began in Meerut and quickly spread throughout northern India. The rebels, mainly sepoys, challenged British authority and proclaimed Bahadur Shah Zafar, the Mughal emperor, as their leader. The rebellion shook the foundations of British rule. The British were caught off guard and reacted with brutality. They crushed the rebellion with force and carried out widespread reprisals. The mutiny was suppressed, but it left a lasting impact. The Sepoy Mutiny was a turning point. It exposed the vulnerabilities of British rule and highlighted the growing resentment among Indians. It led to significant changes in the way India was governed. The British government took direct control, marking the end of the East India Company's rule. The birth of the British Raj. The Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 had profound consequences. It led to a major shift in governance. The British government dissolved the East India Company. They assumed direct control over India. This marked the beginning of the British Raj. Queen Victoria became the Empress of India. A viceroy represented the British Crown. A new era of British administration began. It focused on consolidating power. The British Raj brought significant changes. This period saw infrastructure development. Railways, canals, and telegraph lines were built. The British Raj centralized British rule. Section 6. The costs of empire, economic drain, social divisions, and cultural erosion. The British Raj, while modernizing India, came at a significant cost. Economic drain crippled India's industries. Resources were exploited, making India dependent on Britain. British policies impoverished millions. Social policies exacerbated divisions. Divide and rule sowed discord. British rule eroded traditional customs. Education alienated Indians from their heritage. The British Raj's legacy remains complex and debated. Section 7. Seeds of resistance, the rise of nationalism and the struggle for self-rule. While the British Raj tightened its grip on India, seeds of resistance were being sown. The late 19th century witnessed the rise of Indian nationalism. Educated Indians began to question British rule. They resented the economic exploitation. They chafed under British social and political domination. Organizations like the Indian National Congress, or INC, emerged. They demanded greater autonomy for Indians. They advocated for self-rule. The early nationalists were moderate in their approach. They believed in working within the existing system. They appealed to British sense of justice and fairness. However, the British government was slow to respond. The Morley-Minto reforms of 1909 provided limited concessions. These did little to satisfy the growing demands for self-rule. The First World War proved to be a turning point. India's contribution to the war effort fueled nationalist sentiments. Indians felt they deserved greater political rights. Section 8, the Gandhian era, nonviolent resistance and the march to freedom. The early 20th century saw the emergence of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He is better known as Mahatma Gandhi. He would transform India's struggle for independence. Gandhi arrived from South Africa. He had successfully used non-violent resistance against discrimination there. Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha, meaning truth force, resonated with millions of Indians. He called for non-cooperation with the British government. He led nationwide campaigns. These included the non-cooperation movement from 1920 to 1922 and the civil disobedience movement from 1930 to 1934. Gandhi's non-violent resistance posed a unique challenge to British authority. The British government responded with repression. They jailed thousands of Indians. However, the movement continued to gain momentum. Gandhi's leadership galvanized the Indian people. It made the struggle for independence a mass movement. Section 9. Partition and Independence. A bittersweet dawn for a nation reborn. The Second World War proved to be the final nail in the coffin of British rule in India. Britain, exhausted by the war, was no longer in a position to hold on to its vast empire. The Indian independence movement gained momentum. The Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, demanded a separate Muslim state, Pakistan. The British government, facing mounting pressure and communal violence, decided to partition India. On August 15, 1947, India achieved independence. It marked the end of centuries of British rule. However, the joy of independence was overshadowed by the horrors of partition. Millions of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs were displaced. Communal violence claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. India and Pakistan emerged as independent nations. They inherited a legacy of partition. It continues to cast a shadow on their relations to this day. Independence, while a momentous occasion, came at a heavy price. Section 10. Legacy of the Raj, a complex tapestry of progress and pain. The British Raj left an indelible mark on India. Its legacy is complex and multifaceted. On the one hand, the British introduced modern education, a legal system, and infrastructure such as railways. These developments contributed to India's progress in the post-independence era. On the other hand, British rule resulted in economic exploitation, social divisions, and cultural suppression. The scars of colonialism continue to affect India today. The partition of India remains a painful reminder of the human cost of the British Raj. India's experience under British rule continues to shape its identity. It influences its foreign policy and its place in the world. The legacy of the British Raj is a subject of ongoing debate and analysis. It serves as a reminder of the complexities of colonialism. Section 11, Conclusion, reflecting on a pivotal chapter in history. The history of British rule in India is a long and complex one. It is a story of ambition, conquest, exploitation, and ultimately independence. From the arrival of the East India Company to the birth of the British Raj and the eventual struggle for freedom, this period has left an undeniable mark on India and its people. Understanding the British Raj is crucial for comprehending modern India. Its legacy continues to shape India's political, social, and economic landscape. As we reflect on this pivotal chapter in history, it is essential to acknowledge both the positive and negative aspects of British rule. The lessons learned from this era can serve as a guide for building a more just and equitable future. The story of British India is a reminder of the human cost of colonialism. It is also a testament to the resilience and determination of the Indian people in their quest for freedom and self-determination.